You are listening to the Nature's Premier Podcast, episode 27. Here on the Nature's Premier Podcast, we talk about everything from bees to babies and sustainable living. Join us while we talk about natural parenting and different ways to live a more sustainable lifestyle for ourselves and our future generations to come. Now let's begin. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Nature's Premier Podcast. I am your host, Brooke Nichols, founder of New York's premium cloth diaper service, Nature's Premier, and as always, I am very excited to be here with you all today. Thank you so much for joining us. On today's episode of the podcast, we are going to be talking about technology addiction. Now, this episode barely scratches the surface on such a deep topic, but it really does give a good gauge on what we are up against and helps us to reflect on our own habits with technology, especially with the habits of our children and technology. For those of you who watch our Facebook Lives and YouTube videos, you will know that we talk about technology addiction and the role it plays on our lives very often. Usually we talk about it in the context of nature deficit disorder, but today's episode is going to be more about the physical and the mental addictions that we have with technology and how, these studies back it up and how we can kind of pull away from that and put ourselves back in check so we have a check and balance in our life. Technology, when controlled, can yield absolutely amazing results. We have so many opportunities with technology today, more so than we did even 15 years ago. More opportunities with communicating with loved ones and friends from all over different parts of the world, creating new businesses directly from our phones. Productivity is a completely new beast in today's marketplace, thanks all to technology. It is truly an incredible time to live and a very exciting time to live. However, our habits will shape our future and the future of our children. So it's also a very important time to tune into our habits, especially with technology, as to not have that side completely change our DNA and change us as a species. We can't have too much dependency on it. And, it just becomes another addiction. I mean, we have addictions already that we're fighting on a day-to-day basis, and not even talking about drug addiction or anything like that, because that's a whole other topic. We're talking about addictions like, even with food, even with, watching TV. I mean, there's so many addictions that we have today. Coffee is a big one, or coffee, as many people say. I'm New York, so I'm saying coffee. But, there's so many different addictions that we have, and technology is the big elephant in the room. I mean, if you look around, most people are on their cell phones. Most people don't read books anymore. People are just online. They're on their cell phones. Again, it's an amazing thing. However, we really need to have some kind of check and balance with it as to not have it get out of control and again become another addiction. I am very excited to bring on today's guest to the show today. After reading her book, I have a completely new understanding of the battle we are up against with technology, especially when child rearing. I highly recommend this book to anybody, even if you are single, and especially if you have children, or if you're looking to have children in the future. This is such a groundbreaking book, and I highly, highly, highly recommend it. I'm an avid reader on many topics, and this was one of my favorite books to read. It really gave me a good perspective, and it showed me a lot of different areas that I really didn't have much knowledge in, more just going and following my, inner tuition to limit my technology use. And that's why I love this book so much, because like I said, I am an avid reader, and, a lot of times I'll read a book, even if I know the contents, even if I know, like the topic in depth, like poaching or, things animal rights related, anything like that, dietary, I kind of know the deal, but I like to, maybe just look at other people's point of view. But this book was fantastic because there were a lot of things I had no idea or concept of. And it was just fantastic for me to, look at the studies and look at the research, listen to the stories. And it was just a really, really, really good book. So I highly recommend checking it out, especially if you have a growing family. Today's guest on the podcast is Dr. Mari Swingle. She is the author of iMinds, How Cell Phones, Computers, Gaming, and Social Media Are Changing Our Brains, Our Behavior, and the Evolution of Our Species. She is the winner of a 2015 Federation of Associations in Brain and Behavioral Sciences Foundation Early Career Impact Award for her major research contributions to the sciences of the mind, brain, and behavior, and for increasing awareness of research through media and public outreach. She is an active researcher, practitioner, writer, and speaker who has been working extensively with children, families, couples, and family dynamics with learning and behavioral disorders, emotional deregulation, and many other issues affecting the health and wellness of individuals and families. Dr. Mari speaks locally and internationally on the topics of technology, societal shifts, and mental health. In interviews, she has been referred to as the quote-unquote Dear Abby of the digital era for her extensive practical knowledge. She holds a PhD and MA in psychology, MA in education, and a BA in fine arts. She sits on the board of directors of AAPB and practices locally at the Swingle Clinic in downtown Vancouver. She is an avid painter, singer, and a passionate, talented skier, doing her best to practice what she preaches in an increasingly busy world. That being continuously seeking balance in work, life, and family in the digital age. Mari, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited that we have a chance to talk about your book, talk about the effect technology is having on our society, and I'm just really looking forward, to interviewing you today. So just jump right into it. Before we talk about your book, iMinds, I just wanted to talk about your background and your education and what got you into studying this type of, human psychology and behavior with technology.
Okay, well, I can give you the little technical list. BA Fine Arts, MA Education, MA Psychology, and PhD Psychology. So I kind of covered a bit of ground here. But I think the blend of education and psychology really feeds a knowledge base. But the key here is I'm a practicing clinician. And, I work with, kids from 3 months to adults of 93, the whole range. And I would say around the turn of the century, there was a group of, first it was young male clients that just weren't having the same effects that we were used to with our treatment. And we consider ourselves to be pretty good therapists. And something was up. And then there was the great epiphany. There was a connection with excessive gaming at the time and young male children. So I started watching this a little bit closer. And of course, it was a pond effect. It wasn't just male children, then it was female children, younger, older. Something was really, really going on with excessive applications of screen-based technology. I happened to be doing my PhD at the time and was looking for a topic for dissertation, and it just kind of fell into my lap. I was sitting on 20 years of clinical data. So I have the pre-technology brain mapping and what I'd consider the during. I don't know. There's never going to be an end, but it's a gold mine. That didn't make it into the dissertation because I had to do new research, not clinical research or archive research. But as I said, I had 20 years of data. I had to write about it. I had to do something with it.
Yes, absolutely. And we talk a lot about on the podcast about, limiting technology use, not trying to be alarmist and say technology's bad, because like you talk about in your book, there's definitely a blend, too much is bad, but it's definitely in our society and it's here to stay. Now, when did you see the increase of, this really starting to impact children? You mentioned the study about the two boys, and that was, I think, more like the beginning of the book about how you guys were trying to figure out, just how the behavior was changing and everything like that. And the parents never talked about the child's gaming. And that was like a big elephant that was like left, that was in the room that was not talked about. And you found that when the gaming was introduced and they started to, pull the gaming out of the child's routine, that he was getting better. So when did you start to see a transition from it being a little bit of a problem to being like a massive problem on a large scale, this over technology use?
Oh, it was kind of insipid. It gradually just kind of creeped in. And I want to loop back to what you said earlier. It's not all bad, and that is not the message that I want to put out there. The message I do want to put out is, as parents, please, please, please inform yourself. There's a lot of vested interest wanting to sell products and product usage to yourself and your young children. And then there's the other extreme of zealots saying, it's the worst thing that ever hit humanity. And as always, the truth is somewhere in the middle. And information it'll allow you to make good choices as parents. And I put good in parenthesis because it's different for every family, every parent, and every child. But to get back to the kids, it depends on family dynamics. It depends on culture. It just slipped in under the radar. There was a kind of an ignorance and a naivety about what this was doing. Again, because the promotion was that it was all positive. There was a counterattack to the negativities of gaming. All of the focus was on violent gaming, that violent gaming was negative. But all gaming changes brain process. It changes our abilities to focus. It changes our emotional regulation. And again, the key things are too much, too early, and no alternate. And if you avoid those three, you can really integrate technology nicely into your life, whether it's for educational purposes or scholastic. But I know this question is probably coming. I'm very, very conservative. I say don't introduce it until the age of 6 because it can have major, major effects on social, emotional, and cognitive development of infants and young children.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the points you made was that technology is growing at such a rapid pace that it's actually changing the way that we process information. So are you seeing that in the children and the clients that you work with? Like, is actually changing the way that we're taking in information and that, we just are as a species because it's becoming intertwined so much in our lifestyle?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of things here. One is simply just the speed of information. That when we interact with screens, everything is delivered very, very quickly. So that changes our arousal levels, it changes our expectation cycles, and it changes our ability to focus, meaning we can't focus on things unless they're presented very, very quickly with high entertainment value. You can see the connection with ADHD there, right flat out on the table. You can also see the connection with emotional deregulation. When you are that aroused, you're that engaged with something, and you remove it, well, you get a bit of a downer. Hence a lot of the tantruming.
Oh, yes. Oh, I could totally see that. And that was actually back to, not to bring it back to the boys again, but that study was very telling how the parents, they were only bringing in the technology as a way to negotiate with the child. And finding that when they pulled the technology away, the child would have behavioral issues and it would actually become somewhat of like an addiction. So can you talk with our families today that are listening about some of the negative effects that they could actually see with their own eyes of over technology use in their children?
Well, the number one is the child more interested in technology than you? And this is key because now I'm slipping into attachment. One of the major issues now is children are attaching to objects, then their peers, and then their caretakers or their parents. And it should be the opposite. The primary attachment should be with caregivers or parents. Then as they get a little bit older, to peers and then to objects. The exceptions are cuddly toys that are soothing substitutes for touch, for caretaker touch.
Okay, and that would be one of the first things that they would see as being like a side effect then of having too much technology. Okay.
They want your phone. They don't want you. They want to interact with you like in little games. They don't want to interact with you. They want to interact with the phone. The other is you have to look at the whole purpose of play and interaction of caretakers. One of the examples I like to use is peekaboo. This is a game that you're going to find in every single culture. It's designed literally to teach safety and facial expressions. So you cover your face with your hands and you change your facial expressions, and that's the way the child learns to mimic and read the emotions of the human race. And then, of course, what you do, first you do your hands, then you do a blanket, and you'll notice that the game gets further and further away. Parents will do this behind doorways or behind couches and things. And that, again, installs the notion of safety, that yes, you go away, but you come back. So there are a lot of these very, I call them instinctive games that parents play with children that really have concrete developmental purpose. And when you have a screen in front of a child, it cancels out all other information. It cancels out your existence. It cancels out hearing, voices in the kitchen or shapes and shadows on walls. It cancels out everything. So it's not necessarily what the child is learning on the screen. It's what they aren't learning on the screen. Again, I could go on and on about this, but I think the peekaboo example is a really good one. When your child is on a screen, and for that matter, when you're not on a screen, you're not interacting, which will limit the attachment of an infant on its community, on their parents, and then the larger world of people.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, I mean, I could totally see that. Now, one of the there's so many things in your book, iMinds. I mean, it was probably the most comprehensive study that I've ever read on this topic, because you don't hear about this too much. I think people are so, wanting to just look at the positive and not look at the negative. We know a lot about like nature deficit disorder and how, the overuse of technology and not enough nature is affecting children. But I think it's really on such a global scale. And one of the issues that you talk about in your book is anxiety and ADHD booming with the technology boom. Can you talk a little bit about like the medical possible side effects that you can be getting from overuse of technology?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll jump in with the anxiety. That's about emotional regulation. So the first example I gave you is the delivery of the speed on the screen. And when you're revving that high, it's very high to come off. The other is, and I spend a lot of time specifically talking about adults, but it piddles down to the children, which is when you're feeling a little bit bored or a little bit anxious, or you're not quite sure what to do, and you always pick up your screen, you don't learn to mitigate your environment, and you don't learn to mitigate your own emotions. So the ability to sit in silence, the awkward pauses in conversation. So for example, in adolescence, when you want to approach someone, but you're not quite sure how to do it. If there's a screen in the way, you will never learn how to do it. So essentially, you become anxious without your crutch. And primarily now the phone or smaller portable devices are the issue. It's a really, really big picture that builds. Going back to the children again, if when your child was tantruming and you give them a phone, they learn to soothe through the phone. So when they don't have the phone, they're anxious. All kinds of things in that regard. There's a good little example of that in the book about parents that try and regulate a child's behavior through tablet use at a restaurant because they want to enjoy the company of their friends. The issue is, it filled the parenting gap, and there's a major social issue going on now, which is parents are massively overworked, completely exhausted, and especially in Western culture, we've taken away most of our social and financial support of families. So daycare is outrageous. Staying at home for one parent has gross financial implications. I could go on. And then when parents come home, they're just very, very tired. And I don't have to tell you, children are work. They're wonderful, beautiful, but they're work. So it's filling the parenting gap. And something had to. So we can't blame this on parents. It's kind of like the perfect storm brewing. When parents are very, very tired, they need their own downtime. The child is bouncing off the walls. Well, it's really easy to give them a piece of screen-based technology because it will occupy them. But the problem is it's not only occupying them, it's conditioning them to need the screen for their emotional regulation.
That's fascinating. And it's very true what you say. It's almost filling in like, tech babysitters. I mean, it's so easy to give a child a phone and have them calm down, and the colors and the sounds and things to just bring them right in. They'll stay on that for 5 hours. You know what I mean? Like it's really, like you said, it's a perfect storm, and that's very, very well put. And now for those parents who are listening who may have their children on, devices for many reasons that you stated and many other reasons, what is like a good blend? Because as you said in your book, it's not going anywhere. So we have to learn not to be so addicted, because most people are addicted to their devices, to their phones. Even myself, I had to do the practice of leaving my cell phone at home. And the first couple weeks I was looking for it, even though I knew it was at home. It was a very weird type of addiction. And, like you said, with the long pauses and people avoiding awkward situations by looking at their screen. Now, what's a good blend to introduce technology and not overconsume it? Is it just discipline? Is there any good habits that we can pass on to families so they can implement that in their family?
Yeah, the catch here is there's no one answer, and everybody, wants to be so many hours a day or at this age or that. You really, really have to use your own parental wisdom. People are wired differently as well. I'll get back to that. But what you did with your phone is a very, very good exercise. If you can't leave your phone behind without producing some form of anxiety, that tells you that you should reduce it. So just, use those examples. Same thing with your children. If they can't leave it behind, then that tells you that there's an overdependence on it, an emotional overdependence. I will get to an example of alcohol. I find this is really, really helpful in terms of how we're all made differently. Some children are perfectly fine, a couple of hours a day, and it does not affect them, versus others, half an hour a day is too much. And that's where I bring in the alcohol. Our relationship with screens depends on epigenetics, just the way it does with alcohol. So some individuals can have a sip of wine and they're absolutely fine. Some individuals are happy drunks, some individuals are crying drunks, some individuals are mean drunks. And that's with the same excessive amount of alcohol. It affects us all differently. So look at what your reaction is and look at what your children's reaction is. There's science behind this as well. Again, looking at the alcohol. Our relationship with the screens also determines what the brain does. So with alcohol, a sommelier, so somebody who works with wine or tastes wine professionally, it's the cognitive centers and some of the emotional centers that light up in the brain. For the social drinker who enjoys a glass of wine here and there, or maybe a little bit more at a party, it's the emotional centers that light up. And for the alcoholic, well, you can guess, it's the emotional and the addiction centers that light up. So it's your relationship with alcohol that determines the brain reaction. The same thing with technology. So if it's only being used scholastically, there is a good argument that the cognitive centers will light up with a little bit of the entertainment, just like the sommelier. And then I don't have to tell the whole story, you just go through it. But the primary issue is the majority of children, the brain centers that are lighting up are the addictive centers. It's just like the alcoholic. So just use your parental wisdom in terms of how you're using the technologies, why you're using the technologies. They should be used in childhood as the beautiful tool they were designed to be. And I'm going to repeat that. They should be used as a tool and a little bit as entertainment. And the only real benefit of screens for younger kids is that they're fun. but don't have it switch over like alcohol, that the fun turns into an addiction, and that you can't go to a party without it. Okay, meaning you can't talk with other children without a screen mitigator. Same way that an adult can't go to a party and chit chat without a drink.
Mm-hmm. That's a fantastic analogy, and I think it's very true. And I do believe that most people have some kind of addiction to their screen. Mainly, I'm not sure what you see in your practice, but I think mainly for what I see, it's the phones. I think that's probably the biggest culprit. I think because most people have cell phones. Not even so much TV, because everybody's watching, Netflix and YouTube and everything on their actual devices. And you're seeing, when you go to a restaurant, you see the whole family on their phones or their devices. And I think it's an acceptable addiction. You know what I mean? Because I think everybody has it. So that's very well put. Now, what do you see the future of technology? Do you see us somehow pulling away in any aspect? I know there are a lot of different movements for, outside play and, book clubs and things like that. But do you see us just getting more ingrained as a society into technology, or, what's like your idea of what's going to happen in the future with this?
Well, with a little bit of a wink and a humor here, I want to see more of me out there. Meaning, what you want are voices, unvested voices, that will give people informed choice, to really, really spread the word of what we should be looking at, so that everybody can choose what aspects of technologies they want in their lives and the other aspects that they should reject. I don't want to pontificate. I don't want to tell people what to do, but I do want to tell people to do your due diligence. There are magnificent applications. If we want to go into scholastics, it's arguably one of the best ways to teach math, but it does disasters for any of the arts, the sciences. It's training out elements of the brain that are responsible for creativity. If you don't have creativity, you don't have innovation. You won't have entrepreneurs. You won't have inventors. It's training the brain to be paper pushers, factory workers, cubicle workers. So you really have to be careful of what's being trained in and what's being trained out. I've written a couple of articles, if you want to go on my website, that kind of speak to what the industry is saying the technology is doing versus what it really is doing. I've also talked at a couple of environmental conferences. You mentioned, nature deficit disorder and vitamin N and all of this. In my childhood, we didn't have any of this. Everybody played outside. Throw your kids out in the backyard. If you don't have a backyard, throw them in the park. Bring back the community parent. So if you're too tired, get a really, really good relationship with a couple of other families, and have the kids have sleepovers. So one parent or one set of parents is exhausted over a weekend instead of three. And the other two can have a romantic weekend or just pajama weekend. Those type of things. Put nature in the systems, but also realize that the way the brain is being trained, you learn different things on technology than you learn playing in nature. Very, very different things. And if you are on screens too much, it will literally hijack certain forms of thinking, and it will rewire the way we think to an exclusively, pun intended, programmed way of thinking. An example from the book, and there are numerous ones, is from educational gaming. We see these games, whether we saw them on early television, Sesame Street, and they're dominant in screen-based games now. But it's the matching game, wherein you take three objects and you have to match a fourth. And my example is three yellow squares, and you have to choose between a banana and a pink square. So the child picks the banana, and they're told they're wrong because it was a math game and it was a geometric shape that they were looking for. So it's polarized into a right-wrong. You don't know what that child was thinking. Why did they choose the banana? Now, the obvious is it was color, okay? But there's no opportunity for the child to expand and look for different things. But it can go much, much further. And the example that I have is a child saying, well, it was a pink mint and it didn't taste like the banana candies. Things like that. So the way children think can be very, very fascinating. And it goes beyond what the programmer has thought of. And whenever you do anything on a screen, the child is limited in their creative or innovative process to that which the programmer has thought of, or that which the program permits. And again, I can go on about this. It's on my website. There's an article there on what some of the programs are not doing.
Yes, that's fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating. It's not, and you don't even think of that. That's just something that's really, really interesting. And how you're right, the programmers don't think of that, and sensory deprivation. And there's so many different things, and why we always talk about limiting the the technology use of small children. We see children 2 years old, that can use their phone better than their parents can. And some people just say, hey, it's the generation. That's the new generation. But there's so many issues with a child not, reading. People aren't reading to their children as much anymore because the tablets are doing it for them. They have all these programs that they say are better than, why would you read a book to your kid when they can do it themselves on a tablet? Like, there's so much that you're just missing out on, even if you just have your kids sit on your lap. And I mean, it's crazy, 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 crazy. But I absolutely love your book. Again, it was the most comprehensive study I've ever read on it. And I read several books on it, and it was just very well thought of. Many, many examples, many studies. And I definitely recommend all of our families to check it out. Now, where could our listeners find out more information about you? And also, you had mentioned that you were on a TED Talk recently. So when can they find that info as well?
Yeah, I don't know when it's going to be uploaded, but that would potentially be of interest because I really do talk about attachment in the primary development. It's a short one, as all TEDs are, but yeah, just look out for it. I'd say just Google me, Mari Swingle. The other place is my website, drmariswingle.com. It's currently being upgraded, but shortly a lot of the things will be up there. Also. Connections to the articles and things to have more information.
Now, is there any takeaways that you want to give to our listeners today? Any kind of overall thoughts on, there's a lot we discussed in today's episode, and your book discussed way, way, way more. So definitely, families, check it out. But is there anything that you want to leave our families with today as like a last quip, something that they can just take from this episode?
Yeah, that all technologies are limited in terms of what they give. When you were talking about the programmer didn't think of that, well, no programmer can think about all the possibilities. And when you're putting your children on screens too much, you are limiting all of their possibilities. And possibilities come from human contact and environmental observation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that was very well said. And thank you so much for coming on today. Are you on any social media sites at all right now, or is it just the website that our families can find you on?
Well, true to what I practice, no, because it would be an absolute time thief. I wouldn't be able to write, and I wouldn't be able to service the families that I work with now. So I've made an explicit choice not to be. Apologies.
That's fantastic. Well, they can find enough information in your book and on your website. But thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on today. We learned a lot, and I look forward to seeing more information from you soon.
More than welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, thank you so much. Take care. That wraps up our interview with Dr. Mari Swingle. Please check out her book, iMinds. We highly recommend it here on the podcast. It's an absolute must read for everyone. Definitely check it out. You can also check Dr. Mari out at drmariswingle.com. And as true to form, she does not have social media. However, on this website, you can learn more about her book, about her speaking engagements and events, learn more about the media and the reviews she has, and also read some blog posts that she has. She is going to start doing more blog posts, and she really is such an expert in this field. So definitely check her out and make sure to follow her. She is a fantastic figure in this community, and we're really excited to have had her on the show and look forward to having her in the future. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been a pleasure. That wraps up episode 27 of the Nature's Premier podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in to another episode. We greatly appreciate your patronage here on the podcast. We love hearing from you guys, so please feel free to email us at podcast@naturespremier.com if you have any questions or if you're looking forward to a future collaboration. We love hearing from our listeners. Please remember to rate and subscribe to the podcast. It really does help get episodes out like these to more people so we can spread this information. A lot of people don't know about, technology addiction. It might be in the back of their heads and they might, brush it off as a joke, but it is something that we really do have to address as a society. So it's super important to share this episode. And again, please rate and subscribe so you don't miss another episode from us. Thank you all so much again, and until next week, we hope you have a wonderful, stress-free week ahead. Take care, friends.